All right, everyone. Happy Friday. TGIF. I'm Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams here with your digital desk update. And by the way, welcome to November. And what an October we have seen. Last month was ranking pretty high in the warmth and the dryness. Let's take a look at some of the stats that I was tracking for you last month. So first of all, Halloween. It was pretty warm, right? We've been keeping weather records since 1893 in Gulfport, Biloxi, and yesterday was the fourth warmest. That's over 100 Halloweens to compare to, and we were top 4 with a high temperature of 84 degrees. There have only been a few other Halloweens that were as warm as that, like back in 1927, 1984, 1951, 2016, which was second place, 87, and then the warmest Halloween ever recorded, 88 degrees. Notice no 90s, right? Hopefully those have been put to bed. We usually don't see any 90-degree temperatures during the entire month of November. But everyone last month was screaming and crying for some rain, because look, it was one of the driest ever recorded. Now, we did get a few showers to try to sneak in Halloween evening, but it was not enough to stop us from ranking top 10. So we made our way to the 10th driest October ever recorded since the 1890s. Of course, there were drier Octobers like the one in 1978 and in 1952, in which there were no raindrops at all, at least for the climate reporting site in Gulfport, Biloxi. So how about that? And now that we're into a new month, it's a new weather pattern, one in which we are finding some rain showers out there. There's a view in Biloxi as well as a view in Gulfport and another view in Biloxi, and some of those views are showing raindrops. Our first alert radar map, you can see rain showers during the 8 o'clock hour on Friday, November 1st. So some of you are waking up to wet weather. So those rain dances, they paid off, right? So that's one thing that is a plus for the first day of the new month. We're no longer seeing the continued dry conditions. Will these rain showers last all day? I don't think so. I think we are going to start the day with wet weather, and then we will see some of it gradually tapering off as we head into parts of Friday midday and Friday afternoon. So that's good news. If you have some plans to be out and about later today, you might not have as much wet weather to deal with. And then taking a look at that 7-day forecast, we're expecting conditions to be lower rain chance for Saturday. Most of the rain will be shoved well to our north and west, so we won't have to worry about wet weather tomorrow. However, on Sunday, because it's so warm and so humid, we could see a few pop-up showers, and that same pattern will actually continue into several days of next week, where you could see just a daily little pop-up shower into next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Looking ahead to next weekend, so that's Saturday, November 9th and Sunday, November 10th, you can see maybe a temperature decrease. We might find fewer 80s, more 70s in the afternoons around that time. Might also see some mornings in the 50s. That's the coast 10-day forecast. Places like Ocean Springs, Long Beach, Bay St. Louis, places that are south of I-10. We have a different 10-day forecast that's for areas to the north of I-10, places like Wiggins and Saussure and Van Cleve. That's the one up to the top of this. So that one's the inland 10-day, and then the one down at the bottom is the coastal 10-day. And the inland 10-day shows maybe a morning of 55 degrees next Sunday, November 10th. But of course, when you go that far out in the future, days 8, 9, and 10, the forecast can fluctuate pretty greatly. We could check it again tomorrow, and all those numbers show 80s, and all the rain chances jump up to 50%, or they slide down to 0% each day you check it. There can be some pretty big variations in the forecast update once you go that far out into the future. But it's something that we'll keep an eye on. If you've been hoping for cooler weather, perhaps there will be a sign of that for the second weekend of November, even though the first weekend will be quite warm. So now the second part of this video, we're going to take a deep dive into the tropics, because as I've been monitoring some of the information this morning, we've noticed an increase in the chance for tropical development in the Caribbean. So there's another name on that list, Patty, and a few other names, Raphael and Sarah. Maybe some of those names might get taken The National Hurricane Center is watching 3 areas in the Atlantic. One of them, way in the top of the map there, is a storm force low pressure system. So it's already as strong as a tropical storm. Just doesn't have a name yet, but there's a low chance that it could get named. And it's moving off to the east, so it's no concern to us in the U.S. mainland. However, there are 2 other areas that do appear to be moving toward the U.S. You have an area in the Caribbean which has been upgraded to a high chance of development, and an area near Puerto Rico with a low chance. Those areas of low pressure might actually merge, and they could then move toward the Gulf of Mexico based on the latest model trends. Before we take a look at the models, though, I want to take a look at my analysis of the conditions in the tropics. There are several parameters that you look for to see how well that chance of development will hold up. One of them is wind shear. You hear us talk about a lot about this in hurricane season. The more wind shear there is, the more that can kind of rip a storm apart. And where that yellow tropical wave is near Puerto Rico, there's a lot of wind shear. So it is really going through it, and it does not have a high chance to develop as long as it's under those conditions. But it is moving west, and that's into a zone of less wind shear. So the development chance with that could increase as it moves away from that high shear zone near Puerto Rico. Also, another feature that we tend to look at as far as tropical development is concerned is the dryness in the air. Tropical systems like moisture, atmospheric moisture, and that helps them to develop. However, when they have dry air, that works as a limiting feature for development. And if these graphics can advance, there we go, you can see that where the tropical features are, they're kind of in a decent environment for moisture, but there's a ton of dry air across the Gulf and across parts of the West Atlantic. So that's one thing that could work in our favor to help to limit any kind of big old storm blowing up. There's high pressure that's keeping things generally dry in parts of the Gulf Coast region. A lot of people like to talk about water temperatures, and frankly, the water temperatures are still warm enough for a system to form. Anywhere in red on that map, the water temperature is 80 degrees or warmer, so that's plenty of places. But remember, these are kind of sea surface temperatures and don't tell the whole story. And by the way, these types of sea surface temperatures in early November, it's above normal. Those types of temperatures you generally see in early October or in parts of September, but because we had such a warm October, some of those temperatures running above normal, including in the Gulf of Mexico. There's only a few little bitty spots that have below normal sea surface temps, and that's near the tip of Florida, basically. So plenty of warm water at the surface. But of course, if you've ever jumped into a pool, the temperature near the top of the water, the surface, can be a lot different from the temperature at the bottom of the pool. And the same thing goes for the depths of the waters in the Gulf, Caribbean, and Atlantic. Now, what's happening is, even though we have warm water at the surface in the Gulf, in the depths of the Gulf, there's actually kind of cooler water there. There's not a lot of depth to that warm water. However, there's plenty of depth to the warm water in the Caribbean. So while the tropical activity is over the Caribbean, that'll be its best opportunity to get energy, to get strength from water. Because once that activity moves into the Gulf, there'll be a limiting factor as far as the warm water depth. There won't be as much of that to be in play for strengthening. And when you have a system trying to form, those winds with the system will move across the sea surface waters. And it's hard to describe, but basically, if you're in a bathtub and you have the water sitting in the bathtub, you move that water, you push the water out in front of you with a wave, while new water comes up from the depths to replace that. So even though the water on the surface of the Gulf is warm, as a system trying to form moves over the top of that, it pushes that warm water off the surface, and then some new water comes up to replace it. And the new water that's going to come up to replace it is not that warm, as we're showing you here. Not a lot of depth of warm water in the Gulf. So a lot of talk about the conditions, but now let's take a look at the computer models. And remember, when I show you these, that they are just computer models. So it's not a guarantee that what we see is actually going to happen in reality. But this is a look at what one computer model is showing that we've been watching this morning. The low over the Caribbean and the low over near Puerto Rico may actually merge together to form one area of low pressure, and that would have a decent chance of becoming a new depression or new storm. At this point in time, it's too early to consider it as a credible Mississippi coast threat. But as it gets into the Gulf, it's hurricane season, and we always watch any tropical development in the Gulf in hurricane season. We have our longer range computer models, the GFS model and the European model, and we're tracking the low pressure, which is going to be moving toward the west going into next week. And the thing is, if just one of these models showed low pressure getting into the Gulf, I probably wouldn't care. But the fact that we actually have two computer models showing low pressure getting into the Gulf next week, that does get my attention and lets me know that maybe things could trend that way, where if the models are trending toward that type of scenario, we might have to watch the Gulf of Mexico next week, especially toward the end of next week, around Friday, November 8th, for some potential tropical activity in the Gulf. But where does it go, right? If you get in the Gulf, you got to go somewhere. You're going to Mexico, you're going to Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. Well, that is a really good question, and it is so far out in the future that there's no way we're going to nail down the exact answer to that question today. But we can give you a general idea of the possible scenarios, and there's two general lines of thinking here. The models are going to split. Watch as we move this into Saturday. The European model goes toward Mexico. The GFS model comes up toward the northern Gulf. And potentially you have a tropical system there Sunday, November 10th, not too far, maybe 200 miles offshore of South Mississippi, offshore of coastal Louisiana. So something to monitor as you have that kind of split in the modeling. The reason for that split, one model going to the right, one model going to the left, is because of the high pressure that will be steering this. How strong will it be? If you have a big old strong high pressure, like the European model wants to show, then that's going to force that tropical activity to go west toward Mexico. It will not have an opportunity to come up into the northern Gulf by us. But if you have a weaker high pressure, then it's going to be smaller high pressure, and the circulation around that high pressure could actually help to steer a disturbance or some tropical activity a little bit more to the northern Gulf, like the GFS model is showing. So that's the kind of two scenarios, the two lines of thinking, the two possibilities heading into around next weekend time frame. So even though the first weekend of November we're doing well, by the second weekend of November we might be monitoring some tropical activity in the Gulf. Here's the wind speeds with the GFS model. This one shows a bit of a stronger system. I don't see anything that indicates hurricane strength. I mean, it is November after all. November hurricanes are so rare. But November tropical storms aren't actually that rare, although they are in the Gulf. Look at the colors there. You got what? Red colors indicating tropical storm winds of 50, 60 miles an hour. And that's about as strong as you can get. I don't really anticipate going toward hurricane strength. And that was just one model. We show you the other one, the European computer model. And remember, this one is a little bit weaker and it goes a little bit more to the west, toward Mexico. So you barely see tropical storm strength there. The colors are basically yellow. So winds of around 40 miles an hour. It might just be just a depression. So wow, what a variety of scenarios. Will we have a tropical storm moving up to the north, or we have a weak depression heading off toward the west in the Gulf of Mexico next week? And like I said, it's just, as of today, a little bit too early to lock that kind of information in. But one thing is for sure, I don't think it's looking like a credible threat to the Mississippi coast at this time. Do you understand what a credible threat means? When I say that, I mean that you expect to take action to protect your property and your life from tropical activity. And are you doing that? Are you evacuating? Are you getting sandbags right now? Is anyone doing that? And the answer is no. So that's why I use those words, credible. Possible, sure, but credible, I think it's a little bit too early to go that far. So right now it's just something to watch. And a reminder that hurricane season does not officially end until November 30th. So I know it does seem like it goes on forever there, but we're not completely done with hurricane season until the final day of this month. So we have another 30 days, or if you don't count today, another 29 days of hurricane season left. And frankly, even when you get out of hurricane season, Mother Nature can form storms, and Mother Nature doesn't care about your calendar. It's not like a sharp cutoff where December 1st, it's like, okay, I'm done, I'm going to bed. Like, you can get a tropical system to get named in the month of December. It's happened before. I think we saw it, if not in 2020, then definitely back in 2005. I think we've even seen some systems get named in the month of January. They're not in the Gulf usually, but it can happen somewhere in the Atlantic or the Caribbean. But typically, most activity happens during hurricane season, June 1st through November 30th. And for the month of November, there's actually hotspots right where we're watching for development. The blue area there indicates where you can see tropical development in the month of November. This is based on weather history from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So places in the West Caribbean, places near the Bahamas, and between North Carolina and Bermuda. Those are places that we typically, if we're going to see any tropical activity in the month of November, that's where it usually forms. Notice that the Gulf is not a hotspot. One of the reasons why is because we tend to, from October to November, see more and more cool fronts that help to steer tropical activity away. But when was the last time we saw a cool front? It's been a few weeks, right? So because of that, that may be one sort of thing that allows for tropical activity to get a little bit closer to the Gulf of Mexico, because we haven't seen cool fronts to help to steer things away. This is a bit more detailed of a map showing the first 10 days of November where any system has formed and where it has went since 1851. Again, this information from NOAA. And yes, you can have storm tracks back in the 1800s and early 1900s. There were shipping channels and people did track hurricanes back then, over 100 years ago. And you'll notice, again, where's most of the activity clustered in the first days of November? Right there in the West Caribbean, where we're watching for tropical activity, and not too far from Hispaniola as well. So those during the first 10 days of November do tend to be kind of hot spots for late season tropical activity in the early part of November, but usually you don't see it move into the Gulf. There's actually one line. I'm going to blow this up full screen. And there is one line there that you see that moves into the Gulf and actually up to near parts of Mississippi and Alabama. I wonder what storm that is. I don't know them all. But you can sometimes get some of these systems to move into the Gulf, but typically most of the activity does not form in the Gulf, and typically it just is kind of some West Caribbean onto the West Atlantic. So overall, that's what we'll be watching in the tropics, the potential for the second weekend of November to feature some possible tropical activity, but at this time, it's a little too early to consider it as a credible threat to the Mississippi coast. But we'll keep an eye on it. We have plenty of days to watch. And usually once you get into November, you're not talking about some threat from a big storm or anything like that. Might be, more of a depression or a tropical storm, but not a major hurricane or anything like that. Once you get into November, there's just really not enough depth of warm water to fuel some type of major hurricane. But can it fuel enough to pop a depression or a quick little tropical storm? That has happened, as this map shows you, in history. So it is a possibility, but not a likability as we go into next week. So that'll do it for this tropical and weather update for the Digital Desk on your Friday, November 1st. I hope that you have a great first weekend of the new month. Maybe you're listening to some Christmas songs if you're really early and up and at 'em. I know Mariah Carey has thawed, as according to the forecast, so she's already probably singing her tunes. And I know there's at least one local radio station that tends to already start with the Christmas music. And before you know it, once we get deeper into the month, we could see a bit more of a cooler pattern, as November is usually when we see our first taste of 30-degree temperatures across South Mississippi, even though none of them show up in the 10-day forecast. I would imagine by the time we get to Thanksgiving, we will at least have had at least one frost and at least one round of temps in the 30s. Well, I hope that you have a great day and a great weekend. We'll catch you on the next Digital Desk update. For now, I've been Senior Meteorologist Wesley Williams. Take care and have a good one.